On a quiet Tuesday morning in the small town of Maplewood, Ohio, 6-year-old Emily Harper pushed open the heavy glass doors of the police station. Her tiny pink sneakers squeaked across the polished floor as she walked straight to the front desk. In her small hands, she tightly held a crumpled photograph of her father. The officers behind the counter smiled at first, thinking it was another lost child looking for help. But when Emily looked up with big, serious eyes and spoke in a clear, steady voice, the entire room went silent. "My daddy didn't come home last night," she said. "Can you please find him?" Detective Sarah Klein, who was sipping coffee nearby, turned around and froze. The man in the photo was Richard Harper, a software engineer who had died 7 years ago in a terrible car crash on Route 41. Sarah had worked that case herself. She had seen the wrecked car, the funeral, and the closed file. Yet here was a little girl claiming her father had made her pancakes just yesterday morning and promised to take her to the county fair. The photograph felt warm, the paper fresh. Every officer in the station stared in shock. Something impossible was happening in their quiet town, and this brave little girl had just walked in carrying the first crack in a 7-year-old lie. Detective Sarah Klein set her coffee down so quickly it spilled across the counter. She walked over slowly, her heart beating faster with every step. She knelt down in front of the little girl so their eyes were level. "Hi, sweetheart," Sarah said gently, her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. "My name is Detective Klein. Can I see that picture?" Emily nodded and handed her the photo. Sarah stared at the smiling face of Richard Harper. She remembered every detail of that old case. The burned car on Route 41, the dental records that matched, the funeral where she had watched a small coffin go into the ground. Richard Harper had been dead for 7 long years. Yet the paper in her hands felt brand new, the colors bright and fresh. "What's your name, honey?" Sarah asked. "Emily Harper," the girl answered clearly. "I live with my daddy at our house. He made me pancakes with chocolate chips this morning. He said we would go to the fair on Saturday if he finished his work early." The other officers stayed completely silent. One older sergeant whispered something into his radio and then stopped mid-sentence. Everyone could feel the strange energy in the room. Sarah took Emily's small hand and led her to a quiet interview room with soft chairs and coloring books. She sat beside the girl and asked more questions. Emily described her bedroom, with the blue walls and the big window that looked at the trees. She talked about her father's favorite blue shirt with the tiny white buttons. She even mentioned a hidden room in the basement, where her daddy sometimes worked at night and told her never to go inside alone. Sarah's mind was racing. There was no record of any Harper family living at the address Emily gave. The house actually belonged to an old couple who had lived there alone for 20 years. Nothing made sense. While Emily colored quietly, Sarah stepped outside the room and spoke to her partner in a low voice. "Run the name Richard Harper again, and check this photo for fingerprints. Something is very wrong here." As she looked back through the glass at the innocent little girl, Sarah felt a cold chill run down her spine. This child was either living in a dangerous fantasy or she had just opened a door to a secret that someone had killed to keep, buried 7 years ago. And now that secret was sitting in her station, coloring with crayons and waiting for her daddy to come home. Sarah stood outside the interview room watching Emily color a bright red house with yellow windows. The little girl hummed a soft song while drawing. Sarah's partner, Detective Mike Torres, walked up quickly with a tablet in his hand. "We ran everything," he said in a low voice. "No Emily Harper or Richard Harper at that address. The house belongs to Mr. and Mrs. Whitaker, both in their 70s. They've lived there alone for over 20 years. Neighbors confirm it." Sarah rubbed her forehead. "This doesn't make sense. The child is too calm, too detailed. She's not making this up." She took a deep breath and went back inside the room. Emily looked up with hopeful eyes. "Did you find my daddy yet?" Sarah sat down and smiled softly. "We're trying our best, Emily. Can you tell me more about your house? What does the outside look like?" Emily thought for a moment. "It has a big tree in the front with a swing. The door is red, and there's a secret basement room downstairs. Daddy goes there at night after I sleep. He says it's for important work and I should never go in alone." Sarah felt her stomach tighten She had never mentioned any basement in the old case files. Richard Harper's official records showed he lived in a simple apartment before the crash. No house, no basement, no secret room. She stepped out again and spoke quietly to Mike. "Get a search team ready. We need to check that address right now and run the photo through the system again. Something feels very wrong." 2 hours later, Sarah and Mike pulled up to the address Emily had given. An elderly couple answered the door. Mrs. Whitaker looked confused when shown Emily's picture. "We've never seen this child before, and we don't have a basement. This house doesn't even have one." As they drove back to the station, Sarah's phone rang. It was the lab. "Detective, the photo paper is less than a week old. Fresh print, and we found a partial fingerprint on the back. It matches Richard Harper's prints from the old case." Sarah almost dropped the phone. The car grew silent, except for the sound of the tires on the road. Emily had walked into the station with a photo of a dead man printed days ago. She spoke about a house that didn't exist and a secret basement no one knew about. Back at the station, Emily was still coloring peacefully, but Sarah now felt a heavy weight on her chest. This sweet 6-year-old girl was either lost in a world that wasn't real, or she had just opened the door to a dangerous secret that someone had worked very hard to bury 7 years ago. And now that secret was sitting right there in the police station, waiting for answers. Sarah returned to the interview room, trying to keep her face calm. Emily looked up from her drawing and smiled. "Did you find Daddy?" she asked again, her voice full of hope. Sarah sat beside her and gently took the crayon from her small hand. "We're still looking, sweetheart. But I need you to tell me everything you remember about the last few days." While Emily spoke, Mike Torres burst into the observation room next door with fresh lab results. "Sarah, you need to see this," he said urgently. The photo paper was printed only 3 days ago, at a store 20 miles outside town. Even more shocking, the partial fingerprint on the back matched Richard Harper's records perfectly. The same man who had supposedly died 7 years earlier. Sarah felt the room spin. She stepped out and closed the door behind her. "This can't be real," she whispered. "I attended his funeral. I saw the body, or what was left of it." Mike lowered his voice. "The captain wants us to keep this quiet for now. No one outside this station should know. If Richard Harper is alive, then everything about that crash was a lie." Late in the afternoon, Emily finished her drawing and handed it to Sarah. It showed a tall, grey building with completely black windows and several men holding guns standing outside. "Daddy works here sometimes at night," Emily explained. "He wears a special badge and told me if he ever doesn't come home, I should give this picture to the police." Sarah stared at the drawing. The building looked familiar. It matched a sealed federal facility on the edge of the county that was part of an old, restricted investigation. No public photos of it existed. How could a 6-year-old know about it? As the sun began to set, 2 men in dark suits arrived at the front desk. They showed IDs and asked for Emily by name. "We're from Child Protective Services," one said smoothly. "We received a report about an abandoned child." Sarah watched them through the glass. Something about their faces and the way they moved felt wrong. Emily suddenly grabbed Sarah's arm tightly and hid behind her. "Those are the bad men," she whispered. "Daddy said they want to hurt us. Please don't let them take me." The entire station grew tense. Sarah's instincts screamed danger. The fingerprint, the new photo, the secret building, and now these 2 strangers who knew too much. Someone had been watching. Someone had been waiting. And this brave little girl had just walked into the police station and pulled the thread that could unravel a deadly 7-year secret. Sarah quickly pulled Emily closer and signaled to Mike with her eyes. The 2 men in dark suits stood at the front desk, speaking calmly but watching everything. Their IDs looked real, but their eyes were cold. Sarah stepped forward, keeping Emily behind her. "This is an active police matter," she said firmly. "We'll need proper paperwork and clearance before anyone takes her." The taller man smiled without warmth. "Detective, this is for the child's safety. We have orders." But Emily's small hands gripped Sarah's jacket tighter. "They're the ones Daddy hides from," she whispered again. "They have guns under their coats." Mike moved fast and quietly blocked the hallway. Tension filled the station like thick smoke. The officers at the desks watched silently, hands near their weapons. The two men finally stepped back after a short standoff, saying they would return with more documents. As they left, Sarah noticed one of them glance back at Emily, with a hard look that sent chills down her spine. Once they were gone, Sarah took Emily to a more secure room in the back. She knelt down and showed her the drawing again. "Emily, tell me everything about this building. It's very important." The little girl pointed at the tall grey shape. "Daddy goes there at night. He calls it the Black Tower. He wears a white coat sometimes and talks on special phones. He said bad people want his work, and if anything happens to him, I must show this picture to the police." Sarah's heart pounded. She recognized the building from a sealed federal file she had seen years ago during the original investigation. It was a restricted research facility on the outskirts of the county, supposedly empty and locked down. No civilian, especially a 6-year-old, should know anything about it. Later that night, while Emily slept on a small cot under police watch, Sarah and Mike dug deeper in the records room. They pulled the old crash file. The more they read, the more holes appeared. No real witnesses to the accident. The dental records had been rushed, and the company Richard Harper worked for had ties to government contracts involving secret surveillance technology. Sarah stared at the evidence board. The new photo, the fresh fingerprint, the impossible details from a child. Everything pointed to one terrifying truth. Richard Harper had never died. He had been living in the shadows for 7 years, and now his daughter had just walked into the light, carrying his secrets. Outside the station, dark cars passed slowly on the quiet street. Someone was watching. The lie that had been buried for 7 years was breaking open, and Emily had become the key that could get them all killed. Sarah stood by the window watching the dark cars disappear into the night. Her hands were cold. She turned back to Mike. "We can't keep her here. Those men will return, and next time they might not leave so easily." Mike nodded. "I'll get an unmarked car ready. We'll take her to the safe house on Willow Road." Emily woke up slowly when Sarah gently touched her shoulder. "Are we going to find Daddy now?" the little girl asked, rubbing her eyes. Sarah forced a smile. "We're going to a safer place first, sweetheart. Somewhere those bad men can't reach you." Emily trusted her completely and held her hand tight. As they slipped out through the back door of the station, the drive through the quiet Ohio roads felt endless. Every set of headlights behind them made Sarah's stomach twist. Mike kept checking the mirrors. Halfway to the safe house, Emily suddenly spoke from the back seat. "Daddy said if the bad men come, we should go to the old crash place. He left something there for me." Sarah and Mike exchanged a sharp look. "The crash site?" Sarah asked. "On Route 41? Emily nodded. "He showed me on a map once. He said it's not really where the car burned. It's where he changed everything." They changed direction immediately. The woods grew thicker as they approached the old site. Yellow police tape from 7 years ago still hung torn on some trees. Mike parked deep in the shadows, using flashlights. They followed Emily as she walked confidently through the underbrush, like she had been there before. She stopped near a cluster of rocks and pointed. "There." They dug carefully and found a small metal box buried under leaves and dirt. Inside was a burner phone and a handwritten note. Sarah turned on the phone. It had one unread message. "If you're reading this, they found her. Protect my daughter at all costs. The truth is in the Black Tower. Do not trust anyone inside the department." A loud branch snapped behind them. Mike drew his weapon. 2 figures moved between the trees. Gunshots rang out suddenly, cracking through the silent woods. Sarah grabbed Emily and ran toward the car while Mike returned fire. Bullets hit the trees near them as they sprinted. The attackers were not ordinary criminals. They moved with training and purpose. They escaped back onto the main road, hearts pounding. Emily sat quietly in the back, clutching the note. Sarah realized the terrifying truth. There was a leak inside the police station. Someone close to her had told the hunters exactly where to find them. The 7-year secret was alive, and now it was hunting them back. Sarah gripped the steering wheel tightly as the car sped down the dark country road. Her heart was still racing from the gunshots in the woods. Mike sat in the passenger seat, checking the mirrors every few seconds. In the back, Emily held the burner phone and the handwritten note close to her chest like a treasure. Daddy said only good police can read it, she whispered. They drove for nearly an hour, avoiding main roads, until they reached an old motel on the edge of the next county. Sarah paid in cash and chose a room at the very back. Once inside, she locked the door, pulled the curtains shut, and checked every window. Mike stood guard near the door with his gun ready. Sarah turned on the burner phone again. The single message was still there, but now another file appeared when she entered the password from the note. It was a short video of Richard Harper. He looked older, tired, but very much alive. "If you're watching this, Emily found you," he said quietly in the video. "My real name is still Richard. I faked my death 7 years ago because I discovered my company was developing illegal surveillance, software for very dangerous clients, foreign agents and criminals. I took proof and went underground. They've been hunting me ever since." Emily's eyes filled with tears as she watched her father on the small screen. "He promised he would come back," she said softly. Sarah felt the weight of the situation growing heavier. The company Richard worked for had powerful connections, even inside law enforcement. That explained the leak at the station and the men who came so quickly. Mike rubbed his face. "We can't trust anyone back home. We need to get this evidence to the FBI, but carefully." Just then, the motel phone rang. Sarah froze. No one should know they were there. She picked it up slowly. A distorted voice spoke on the other end. "We know where you are, Detective. Give us the girl and the phone, or none of you will see morning." The line went dead. Sarah looked at Mike with fear in her eyes. They had driven carefully, taken back roads, yet the hunters had already found them. Emily curled up on the bed, hugging her knees. Outside, car doors slammed in the parking lot. Shadows moved past the curtains. Sarah loaded her weapon and whispered, "We're not safe here anymore. We have to move, now." The 7-year secret was no longer hidden. It was chasing them, and it was getting closer with every minute. Sarah grabbed Emily's hand and pulled her toward the back window while Mike checked the front. "Out the back now," she whispered urgently. The little girl moved quickly without crying, clutching the burner phone tightly. They slipped through the bathroom window into the cold night air just as heavy footsteps kicked open the motel room door behind them. Mike fired 2 warning shots to slow the attackers. Sarah lifted Emily into her arms and ran toward the trees behind the motel. A black SUV roared to life in the parking lot and gave chase. Bullets shattered the rear window of their car as they jumped inside. Mike floored the gas pedal, and the old sedan screamed onto the highway. "Hold on tight," Sarah told Emily, who was curled low in the back seat. Headlights filled the mirrors as 2 vehicles closed in fast. Mike swerved sharply onto a narrow farm road, trying to lose them in the darkness. The pursuing SUVs were bigger and faster. One pulled alongside and tried to run them off the road. Metal scraped against metal with a terrifying screech. Sarah returned fire through the broken window, hitting one attacker's tire. The SUV spun out behind them, but the second one kept coming. Emily covered her ears but stayed brave. "Daddy said you would keep me safe," she whispered. In the middle of the chaos, Sarah's police radio crackled. With a message only she could hear, it was from inside the station. Someone was feeding their exact location to the hunters in real time. The betrayal cut deep. Someone she worked with every day was part of this. Mike finally lost a second vehicle after a sharp turn through an old covered bridge. They drove deep into the woods and killed the lights. The car fell silent except for their heavy breathing. Sarah looked back at Emily, who was shaking but still holding the phone and the evidence. Like her father told her. "We can't go back to the station," Sarah said quietly. "There's a leak. Someone on the inside is working with them." Mike wiped sweat from his face. "Then we go straight to the Black Tower. We finish what Richard started." The night felt darker than ever. The hunters were closing in. The conspiracy reached inside the police department, and the only hope was a 6-year-old girl carrying secrets that could destroy powerful people. Time was running out. Sarah's hands trembled on the steering wheel as they finally stopped deep in an abandoned old barn far off the main roads. The engine ticked quietly in the darkness, while Mike blocked the big doors with old wooden planks. Emily sat on a blanket in the corner, still holding her teddy bear tightly. The little girl had not cried once during the chase, but her eyes looked exhausted. "We only have a few hours before they track us again," Sarah said, breathing hard. She knelt in front of Emily and spoke gently. "Sweetheart, did your daddy give you anything else to keep safe? Anything hidden?" Emily nodded slowly. She turned her teddy, bare upside down, and carefully pulled open a small seam in its back. From inside, she took out a small black USB drive. "Daddy said, this is the most important thing. He told me to give it only to someone who protects me like he does." Sarah plugged the drive into her laptop using a portable battery. Mike stood guard near the barn door with his gun ready. The files opened one by one. Richard Harper had recorded everything. Meetings, emails, secret transfers. His company had been selling powerful surveillance software to dangerous foreign groups and criminals inside the United States. Names of corrupt officers appeared on the screen, including one high-ranking detective from their own station. Sarah felt sick. This is bigger than we thought. Richard didn't just fake his death to hide. He stayed alive to gather proof from the inside for 7 years. A new video file played. Richard looked straight into the camera. "If you see this, Emily is with you. The Black Tower holds the final server with all the live data. I couldn't destroy it alone. Take Emily there only if you have no other choice. Tell her I love her." Emily started crying softly when she heard her father's voice. Sarah hugged her close. Outside, the wind picked up and strange lights appeared in the distance. Flashlights moving through the trees. The hunters were searching again. Mike whispered, "We have to move toward the Black Tower before sunrise. But with the leak in our department, they'll expect that." Sarah looked at the brave little girl in her arms and the dangerous evidence on the screen. The USB drive now made them targets for more than just local criminals. Powerful people would kill anyone to keep these secrets buried. The barn suddenly felt too small. Every shadow outside seemed alive. They had the proof that could bring everything down, but they were running out of time and places to hide. The final truth waited in the Black Tower, and they would have to risk everything to reach it. Sarah closed the laptop and looked at Mike with hard eyes. "We go to the Black Tower tonight. No more running." Mike checked his gun and nodded. They slipped out of the old barn under the cover of darkness, moving quickly through the woods toward the restricted facility on the edge of the county. Emily walked between them, holding Sarah's hand tightly, her small legs moving fast to keep up. The Black Tower rose like a dark shadow against the night sky, its windows completely black as Emily had drawn. No guards stood outside, but security cameras moved silently. Sarah used the codes from Richard's USB drive to open a side service door. Inside, the building was cold and quiet, filled with long hallways and humming servers. Every footstep echoed. They reached the main server room on the upper floor. Sarah plugged in the USB and began downloading the final files. Red warning lights suddenly flashed across the walls. "We've been detected," Mike said. Heavy footsteps came from below. The hunters had arrived. Gunfire erupted in the stairwell. Mike pushed a heavy desk against the door while Sarah worked faster. Emily hid under a desk, covering her ears. "Daddy said this would help people," she whispered. Bullets ripped through the door. One grazed Mike's arm, but he kept firing back. Sarah's voice shook as the download finished. "We have everything now. Names, money trails, everything." But as they turned to escape, the door burst open. The two men in dark suits entered with weapons raised, followed by a senior officer from their own station. The leak. "Give us the girl and the drive," the corrupt officer ordered. "Richard Harper is finished." Sarah aimed her gun, heart pounding. Just then, all the lights in the building went out. In the darkness, a new voice echoed through the room. "Put your weapons down." The emergency lights came on. A man stepped out from behind the server racks. Older, bearded but unmistakable. It was Richard Harper. He was alive, holding a gun and wearing a security uniform. He had been working inside the Black Tower the entire time, gathering the final proof. Before anyone could react, Richard fired, disarming the corrupt officer. A fierce shootout filled the room. Sarah pulled Emily to safety as bullets flew past them. The truth had finally stepped out of the shadows. The emergency lights cast long, blood-red shadows across the server room as bullets. Shattered computer screens and sparks flew everywhere. Sarah shielded Emily with her body under a heavy metal table. her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. Mike fired back from behind an overturned desk, his arm bleeding badly. Richard Harper moved like a ghost between the server racks, shooting with deadly accuracy. The man everyone believed had died 7 years ago was now fighting for his daughter's life. "Stay down," Richard shouted, his voice strong but filled with years of pain. One of the men in dark suits lunged toward Emily's hiding spot. Richard fired twice. The man dropped. The corrupt officer from their own station tried to run, but Mike tackled him hard to the ground. The second attacker turned his gun toward Richard at point-blank range. For one terrifying second, everything froze. Then Sarah rose and fired. Her bullet hit the attacker's shoulder, spinning him around. Richard finished it with one clean shot. Silence fell over the room except for the humming servers and the sound of heavy breathing. Richard lowered his gun slowly. His eyes locked onto Emily as she crawled out from under the table. "Daddy?" she whispered, her voice shaking. The little girl ran straight into his arms. Richard dropped to his knees and held her tight, tears running down his face. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. Daddy's never leaving you again." Sarah watched them, her own eyes wet. 7 years of lies, pain, and hiding had ended in this cold server room. Richard looked up at her. "Thank you for protecting her. I knew if she reached the station, someone good would help." Mike secured the corrupt officer in handcuffs while Sarah called the real FBI using the secure line from Richard's system. Within minutes, federal agents swarmed the Black Tower, the evidence from the USB drive and the final server. Files was enough to bring down the entire illegal operation. Names of powerful people flashed across screens, politicians, company executives, and dirty cops who had helped sell dangerous surveillance technology to the highest bidders. As the sun rose over the Ohio fields, Richard sat in the back of an ambulance with Emily wrapped in a warm blanket on his lap. He finally told Sarah the full truth. He had faked his death not just to hide, but to become a ghost inside the company. Every night for 7 years he had gathered proof, while watching his daughter grow up from a distance. Through secret cameras he had installed himself. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. The corrupt officers from the Maplewood station were arrested that same morning. The 2 men in dark suits would never hurt anyone again. Detective Sarah Klein stood outside the police station where it all began, watching Richard and Emily walk toward a waiting car. Emily turned around one last time. She smiled at Sarah and gave a small wave. The same brave little girl who had pushed open those heavy doors, holding her father's photo. Richard looked back too and nodded silently in thanks. As their car drove away, Sarah felt the weight of the case lift from her shoulders. A 6-year-old girl had done what no one else could. She had brought her father back from the dead and torn down a dangerous conspiracy that had lived in the shadows for 7 long years. In the quiet town of Maplewood, life would slowly return to normal. But Sarah would never forget the morning. A little girl in pink sneakers walked into the station and changed everything forever. What would you do if your child walked into a police station holding a photo of someone who died years ago? Could you trust what you see? If you enjoyed this suspenseful story, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new upload. Your support keeps these stories coming.